Hello, class. It's a delight to meet you for the first time today and to welcome you to our course in International Academic Relations, LHA 3810. We are going to be meeting on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock. It's going to be a synchronous class running from about 5 till 7 or perhaps a little after 7. And we'll have a video lecture for you just to give you an introduction to the readings each week, ready for you to look at before you come to the class. And then we'll hope to have very good sharing and interaction at the class. In the very first session, I want to invite each student to introduce themselves and let us know about your background, because this is a class where whatever you have studied in the past, whether it be history or philosophy, political science, science areas, obviously education or other areas, will be relevant, and you'll be in a position to share and to build on that. It's going to be building a kind of sharing knowledge community together. So let me tell you first just a few brief words about the purpose of the class. What are the learning outcomes that we would like to see? It's a class that integrates higher education with the field of international relations, an important political science field. And we're going to overview 4 paradigms of international relations. So one of the learning outcomes would be to be able to articulate and reflect thoughtfully on how universities act in the global community and what kind of a frame, how would we understand the global community in terms of various paradigms of international relations theory. So being able to just explore and articulate that will be one of the purposes of the course. The second purpose is learning to write and speak very clearly and articulately. So you're going to be given 2 opportunities to make presentations during the course, and also to write 2 very short papers. One will be a summary of a reading or a book that you'll share with the class. One will be something that prepares you for your final paper for the course. And then perhaps the most important outcome that we hope to see is that we all learn how to learn together and work together collaboratively, to respect one another, to respect different viewpoints, different backgrounds, different traditions, and to have a truly reciprocal learning environment in which we learn together. So I'm sure that all of you will be very open to that approach. Now I'm just going to overview briefly for you the structure of the course. So you have some sort of an idea, what are we going to be covering? The course in a way is divided into 3 sections. So the first section presents 4 paradigms of world order, drawing upon international relations theory. This is a very classic literature, but obviously literature that's changed over time. And I've tried to select readings that just help you to grasp some of the core ideas and then to reflect on what those paradigms mean for higher institutions, whether it be universities or colleges or vocational colleges. What kind of shape do they provide for higher institutions to act in the world community? So the first is the realist view. You might call it the classical view, which really emphasizes the nation state and tends to emphasize a kind of real politic of power and national interest and interactions based on benefits to countries, nation states, regions of the world. The realist tradition in international relations. And universities are often seen as a kind of cultural arm of particular nation states, having an influence on behalf of the nation state. The second view, perhaps the most common and popular one, we might call the liberal view. And you're going, in many of your courses, you're going to learn a lot about neoliberalism, which is really a sort of theoretical framework behind much of what happens in economic globalization. So here, rather than looking at political interests of nation states, the emphasis is much more on economic competition, the idea of a global knowledge economy, the kinds of regulations that control and order such an economy, and how universities are seen within it. Now, the interesting thing about the liberal is there's really three forms of it, and we'll try to get a sense of each one of them. There's a classical form, there's what is often called the neoliberal form, emphasizing the economic, and then there's a very interesting one identified as compensatory liberal. So we'll look at all three liberal visions or paradigms and how universities might be understood to operate within them. The third one is a very, very important one, having a long history, and that's the Marxist and neo-Marxist view. This, of course, is a critical view, and we have both a classical Marxist view that views education as very much part of the superstructure, reflecting the forces of capitalism, the economic forces of capitalism. And then we have various neo-Marxist views. Perhaps the two most common are known as world system theory, related to the work of the historian Wallerstein, and dependency theory, which comes largely out of Latin America. These frames provide a critical way of looking at the way in which the capitalist world system causes inequity, exploitation, colonialism, imperialism, all of those negative forces, and how higher education institutions, whether colleges or universities, may get swept up in them, or perhaps may be able to be in a position to resist them. So that will be the third, a very, very important paradigm with a very large amount of critical literature that gives us a lot to reflect on. We also have thinking like post-colonial thinking, neo-colonial thinking, all of which fall roughly within this critical frame. And finally, the fourth one is perhaps a little bit less known, but it happens to be one that I have found very engaging, and that arose in India in the 1970s, a group of scholars who called themselves the World Order Models Project. And they tried to develop a vision of world order, drawing largely on the global South, scholars from Africa, India, East Asia, whereby social science could be seen as not value neutral, nor value determining, as we say in the Marxist view, where the economy determines the values and patterns, but rather value explicit, that it's up to scholars to create a vision of an ideal world order for the future. What would be the main characteristics of that world order? And what kinds of mechanisms, if you like, would characterize activity that support the development of, they sometimes called it a preferred world order. Can universities contribute to a preferred world order? Now that framework and literature is not so well known now, but much of the new thinking, sometimes called cosmopolitanism or constructivism, the work of UNESCO, which we're going to be looking at on education futures, really comes out of this kind of thinking, where human values and thinking are explicitly played into the creation of an ideal future. And then our research looks at how far in different contexts with different types of institutions or relationships we are moving toward that. So those are the kind of four paradigms that we'll be looking at in the first four sections. Then we're going to go on to part B, which we've called culture or civilization, knowledge, and regional identity. And here we have three sessions. The first one really deals very deeply with questions of culture and civilization. After all, universities arose out of civilizations. They're much older than nation states. They're much older than school systems. They go way back in Indian history, East Asian, Europe, of course, the 12th century. And we're thinking about them as cultural institutions. What does it mean? What's the role of culture, and how does that shape the way universities can act? And here I have to link this to the timing when this course was developed, which was back in the 1990s, Around 1992, we held a conference here at OISE, which we called Knowledge Across Cultures. Later, it was developed into the Dialogue Among Civilizations. This was before 1993, when Samuel Huntington put forward a very influential article called The Clash of Civilizations with a question mark. And this was, of course, after the end of the Cold War, when a whole new set of political relationships were emerging. We're now 30 years after that, but that was a very dramatic time of change. And for me, as a young scholar at that time, I was deeply moved to reflect on how could higher institutions bring the rich knowledge of particularly Asian civilizations, India, China, Korea, other Asian rich civilizations, and also Middle Eastern and African. And how could our Western universities learn from them and integrate their knowledge? So the core reader for this class is a book that was published out of the conference in 1992, republished in Hong Kong in 2001. If you look at it closely, you can see it has Sanskrit, Arabic, and Chinese, in addition to English and also French, and all the papers from that early time. And we hope this will be available to you, also some reviews on this book. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of the history and why the course was developed and the timing in which it emerged. So several readings from scholars affiliated with the World Order Models Project in part B. And then we go on to knowledge, the challenges to knowledge. One of the key issues, a core issue right now. Where is the knowledge from indigenous peoples? Where is the knowledge from civilizations in this global South reflected in university curriculums? What are the challenges to knowledge, and how should universities respond to those? So that's the reading for session 7. And then that's session 6. Session 7 then goes to the whole idea of regionalism. In a way, it's a new thing. It's just been developing maybe the last 20 years. Different regional identities, universities connecting to and moving around in regions. But if you think about it, classically, universities much more reflected the civilization of different regions than that of the nation state. After all, the nation state is a pretty modern institution and somewhat problematic, as we know, in the geopolitics that are going on right now. So here we look at the whole idea of regionness and regionalization and what it means for higher education. And we have several readings related to that. Part C then brings us to universities and colleges, to the institutions themselves, 4 themes about how institutions of higher learning, whether college or university, function. What are some of their main activities, and how can we critically reflect on those and analyze them within these paradigms of international relations, and in connection to the core issues of culture, civilization, and knowledge that are dealt with in the earlier parts of the course. So the first one looks at universities and colleges as actors. So we often think, oh, they're only actors for the nation state. They have to do what they're told. In Canada, even the province has a lot of jurisdiction over higher learning. But one of the core values of higher learning institutions is autonomy. And most parts of the world do give universities a degree of autonomy, which means they have responsibilities and opportunities way beyond their local or even national community, where they can function and operate in an international environment. And how that is thought about and what the possibilities are for higher institutions as actors globally is the core issue that we deal with in session 8. Then we go on to session 9, where we deal with universities and international organizations. The main one, of course, being the United Nations, founded in 1945 after the Second World War. Then institutions, particularly like UNESCO, OECD, we have the World Bank out there, another international organization, many, many others. So how do these institutions interact with, support, or perhaps even have conflict with higher learning institutions? What kind of relationships develop between higher learning institutions and international organizations? You're probably all aware that at this very time, UNESCO has a huge project in which they're looking at the future of higher education. And we're going to try to take a look and reflect a little bit about that whole question. Then we go on to international educational exchanges, scholars and students moving around the world. Once again, it's not something new. It's been happening throughout history in different ways, but happening in perhaps new and sometimes troubling ways, sometimes encouraging ways in recent decades. So how we think about international student and scholar exchanges, that is going to be the 9th session of our class. For the 10th session, we go to universities and international organizations. I think I already covered that. I'm sorry, I got things a little bit out of order in looking at my notes today. So 9 is international student exchanges, 10 is international organizations, where we'll look at UNESCO, OECD, the World Bank, other international organizations, and how they have an impact and also are influenced by the actions and responsibilities of universities. And then finally, for our last session, we come to what is perhaps for us, particularly in Canada, the most important session. What about Indigenous knowledge and higher education? We know this has been a huge topic here in Canada for the last several years, and indeed for a very long period of time. So how do we reflect on and understand the role of Indigenous peoples in North America and other regions of the world, how they interact with and relate to higher education, and how their knowledge can be valued and integrated into higher learning? I thought it would be nice to share a few photographs with you about the history that lies behind this course and when I developed it. I actually developed it, as I remember, in the 90s, but the most important period was the period when we developed the dialogue among civilizations. We had a conference at OISE in 1992 in which we brought scholars from all over the world, and I'll show you pictures of that in a minute. Then we had a follow-up one held in an ancient Chinese academy founded long before the medieval university. It was founded actually in about 900 CE, whereas the universities came into being around the 1100s or 1200s. So that was in 1994. And then the book was updated and published in 2001, the second version of the book. By that time I was living in Hong Kong, and it was very, very, let's say, important or significant because it was a year, the UN had defined it as the year of dialogue among civilizations. That was the year 2001. That was a kind of response, in fact, initiated by Iran to Huntington's clash of civilization and all the debates around clash. Sadly, that year was also the year of the 9/11 tragedy. So we had both clash and dialogue happening in that year. And it really made me feel how important for universities to take up this challenge and to uphold and carry forward a fruitful and reciprocal dialogue among civilizations. So in 1992, we had scholars from India, East Asia, the Middle East, East Africa, Europe, and I emphasize particularly here the women. We had some amazing women from China, Lu Jie, from India, Renuka Narang from a major university in Mumbai, from Egypt, Samia Sidham Peterson, and then we had a wonderful scholar from the First Nations House of Learning at the University of British Columbia. So this just reflects what we were trying to do that early time, almost 30 years ago, to listen to these other voices and hear what they had to say for higher learning and for the university. So our purpose, to consider the contributions to science in the Enlightenment from major world civilizations over long history, and to encourage dialogue, respect, mutual understanding across cultures, across civilizations. I'm kind of proud of the fact that we did this before Huntington's Clash of Civilizations appeared. It appeared 1 year later. That was 1993. So I think that was quite significant. Here's some of the scholars that came from China. Two of them are no longer with us, a wonderful Professor Li Bingde from the northwest of China, another from the northeast, a young scholar then who's now in a very senior position. And behind it, you can see the painting that created the cover for our book, Knowledge Across Cultures. And here we are with the first woman to be the president of a major Chinese university. Her name is Xie Zide. She was president of Fudan University, and she found a way to come and be with us. I had taught when she was vice president much earlier, so I had close links with her. So of course we had people from all the other regions as well that you'll find in the book. I just couldn't capture them in pictures. But we then followed it up with a second conference. Again, very long ago, more than 25 years ago, held in a classical academy built in China in about the 800s or 900s. And this conference was entitled Indigenous Knowledge and Cultural Interchange, Challenges to the Idea of the University. So we wanted it to be not only the cultural and epistemological, but the institutional. What does a higher learning institution in a totally different culture and region of the world look like? And so, as I say, it was a traditional academy built around 960 CE. And again, we brought scholars from India, Africa, Malaysia, Japan, Korea, North America, Europe. We all lived in this academy for a week. This was in around May, I believe it was, of 1994. So we could actually have a living experience in a higher learning institution in a totally different civilization from that of Europe and the European university that's had such a dominant role. And that was the whole idea, to challenge that dominant role, to reflect on and learn from the patterns of historical institutions of higher education in Asian civilizations that are very, very different from the European model, and to reflect even more deeply on the contribution of distinctive knowledge traditions. That's one of the sessions in our course, and what they can say now. And I think maybe there's more listening ears now than there were 25 years ago. I hope so, with all that's happened recently. I have this sense. So here's a picture. Here's the Yuelu Academy, as it's called, and here are the wonderful scholars who gathered today. You can see the classical Chinese writing here and so on, and here you can see them a little bit up close. And I can't resist trying to pointing out one or two here. Right in the middle, you see Ali Mesroui, an amazing African scholar, just passed away a few years ago, who was really an inspiration to all the thinking about alternative knowledge and institutions, and who came all the way from Africa to be with us at the conference. Next to him, a similarly influential Malaysian scholar, Syed Aladdis, no longer living, but again, very active. Behind and next to me, behind Ali Mesroui, Ashish Nandi, still active in Delhi, India, very critical thinking scholar. And then we had many others, as you can see. So this just gives you an idea of also the locale, what it was like, classical Chinese. It's a building on the side of a hill. Everything is facing south. And we are actually able to live in the contours of the academy and carry out our meetings there and have our deliberations and discussions. This is called the Confucian Temple. And this is the place that we used for our large plenary meetings. And then for the smaller ones, we just divided among the different areas within this beautiful classical academy. And here you can see everyone gathering together, talking, sharing with one another. So this is where the journey began. And hopefully we're a little way along the journey, although we still have a very, very long way to go. And I hope that this course will give you a sense of that, and that we can move together into a deeper understanding of universities in a global community, promoting equity, promoting an ideal, preferred future, and working together harmoniously, both for the good of the planet and of all people and societies. I'll just finish by saying each week we'll begin by discussing the core readings. There's usually about 3 core readings. We'll ask you to read them before you come. There's questions to help you think about them, and we'll begin with an open discussion where everyone can raise the points and questions that they're concerned about. Then we'll go into groups, breakout groups, where it's a smaller context for 5 students together, you can go a little bit more deeply into the core readings and work on some of the issues and questions. Then we will have presentations. So I mentioned earlier, each of you will be given 2 opportunities to present verbally in class. Within the first 5 weeks of the course, we'll invite you to pick any one additional reading that's of interest to you, to prepare a very brief summary, just 1 page, and then to present it to the class. This extends everyone's awareness of the literature that lies behind this course, because in addition to the 3 core readings that you have, you'll have 1 reading from the first 5 sessions that you read carefully, and then you'll be able to hear all the summaries of other students. So you'll be able to get a sense that way of the wider reading and what might interest you. That will happen during the first half of the course. During the second half of the course, you'll have the opportunity to prepare your second short paper, which will be due towards the end of the course in later November. And in that one, you'll pick 2 or 3 core readings that interest you. They could be from the additional reading or your own, and put together again a very short essay in which you present the plan you have for your final research paper. And then you'll be able to get feedback, both in your small group and also in the plenary group as we talk. So that will give you an opportunity to get feedback and to work on and prepare your final paper. So that's how I plan to proceed. I hope it will work well for everyone. And I will look forward to getting to know you. I'm sorry that we have to do it entirely online, but I'm hoping there will be possible opportunities along the way for some personal meetings. I'm very open to that. And both my co-instructor, Dr. Grace Karam, and I will be very, very open to interact with you. I guess a final point I should mention, because students are always concerned, how about the evaluation of the course? The main piece of work for evaluation is the final research paper, which I allocate about 70%. And each of the 2 short papers that you do earlier will be 15%. But this is not done in a technical way. You'll get some written feedback on the first paper, and then you'll be able to work on the second paper and get oral feedback, both from us and from other students. And then when I give you the final feedback, it will really integrate all 3, because all 3 are actually connected. And I'm confident that all of you will do very interesting and worthwhile work. So I look forward to meeting you very soon. I look forward to hearing your backgrounds and your interests, why you wanted to join this course and what you would like to bring into the course. And I'm sure our journey together will be a very fruitful one in which we all can deepen our understanding of higher education institutions in the global arena. Thank you.